All right, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, to our business planning series. This is part 3. Today, I am joined by Weldon Long, a very good friend of mine from Colorado Springs area. Wally, great to see you. Welcome.
Good morning, Dale. Glad to be here, my friend.
Thanks for coming up today.
My pleasure.
Always great to see you.
Yep.
So, Wally, you've got a brand new book that just came out last month.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
This book is Consistency Selling. It's kind of the follow-up book to a previous book that I wrote, The Power of Consistency, which, as you well know, is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And in that book, I talk about the mindset for sales, for success in business. In this book, I talk about the actual sales process. You know, what are the specific things we have to do to close business? You know, at the end of the day, nothing happens until something gets sold, right? Somebody's got to sell something. So this book is about closing business.
I love it. So, Wally, you focused a lot on the sales process, a lot on the mindset, and I met you when I was doing internet marketing down in Colorado Springs, and you this was before
this was way back in the website.
That's right.
Yeah, I forget the name. Front Range.
In front.
Yeah.
In front.
Yeah.
That's right.
I forgot we went back that far.
Yep.
That's where I met you.
Yeah. So
trying to block out that period of my life.
So tell us a little bit about your story, because I remember the first time I met you, that's definitely what stood out to me, and it's what stands out to everybody that first meets you. And what I'd love to do today is talk a little bit about your story. Love to talk about your mindset training that you put together.
Yep.
Love to talk a lot more about your new book,
Yep.
Consistency Selling. And I think we're going to do a giveaway too. So we'll show people how they can get the book for free.
Free copies of this book
at the end.
Yep.
And and so I would love to hear about all that stuff. And this is going to be perfect for the real estate agents that might be watching, because they're going into the end of the year here, into 2019. This is all stuff they can apply to themselves and their own business to get going. So talk to me about your story. Where do you come from?
Well, you know, Dale, the thing that you know, the thing that I know, success in business, success in sales, success in real estate, success in anything requires thriving in the face of adversity. We're all going to have difficulties, all right? Every man, every woman has the same 3 problems: money problems, relationship problems, and health problems. At some point in life, we're going to deal with those difficulties. The real challenge is, how do I thrive in the face of those difficulties, right? It's true in real estate. It's true in any business. And it happens that in my life, I happen to develop a very strong competency at overcoming adversity, primarily because I created an awful lot of adversity for myself. In 2004, I opened a small company in my living room. By 2009, I had grown that company to Inc. 5000 status, and I sold that company and started writing books. My first book was called The Upside of Fear, which was an autobiography of my life. But the reason my life story is the subject matter of that book is not because of the business success, right? We've all had a lot of business success. The reason that my life is a subject matter of that book is because just 18 months before I started that company, which would take us back to January of 2003, I was 40 years old, and I was broke, and I was homeless. And that's not a metaphor. I was living, as you well know, in a homeless shelter at 3808 North Nevada, right? 40 years old, completely busted. No home, no car, no nothing. The reason I'm in that shelter at 40 years old is because I had just finished serving over 13 years in the state and federal prison systems. From 1987 until 2003, that roughly 15-year span, I spent 13 years walking prison yards. I was a 9th grade high school dropout. I was a punk. I was a thug. I was a loser. I was a knucklehead. I went to prison the first time when I was 23 years old. Got out when I was 27. Didn't make it, right? Didn't have any job skills. 9th grade high school dropout, convicted felon at that point. Went back to prison for a couple of years. Got out again at 30 years old. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. Ended up getting involved in more criminal activity. Went back to prison at 32 years old. And at 32 years old, I went back for the 3rd time. I had to do 7 years in the federal prison system. But it was during those 7 years that I had that moment of clarity. And that moment of clarity changed everything. 7 years later, I walked out of the penitentiary and had, unexpected success in my life and business. And I'm sure we're going to talk about what happened to make that, kind of switch.
Yeah, well, this is, I think the reason why your story is so compelling to a lot of people and why it resonates with me is because we see other people that are successful, and a lot of times it's easy for us to dismiss their success because they're special in some way.
Right.
And we say, well, I could never be like Wally. I could never be like Tony Robbins. I could never be like Barack Obama. I can't be like them. They have something special. And when I see what you went through, it's not that you're not special. It's that it was all self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Most of what you went through was self-inflicted.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really powerful point to make sure that we all let's sink in that when we create our own problems, the only person that can get us out of that is ourselves. But I do remember you saying I went to do some service with you in a prison in Buena Vista, Colorado, and you were talking on the way there about how there's a lot of guys that are behind bars that still are blaming somebody else for their problems.
Right. Well, I did the same thing. The first 2 times I went to prison, I went the first time at 23, went back at 28. People, when you go to the joint, one of the first things the guys ask you in the yard is, what are you in for? What are you in for, right? And I would tell people, I would say, I'm in here because I'm uneducated and poor. I really believed I was in prison because I was poor and uneducated. What I eventually learned is that I wasn't in prison for being poor and uneducated. I was in prison because of how I tried to solve my being poor and uneducated problem, right? It's always the nature of the solutions, right? The decisions we make that determine ultimately that outcome.
Right. So what happened to you then? What was the moment, the pivotal moment for you in your life?
Yeah, in my case, it was a very specific moment. Seems like it was yesterday. It was over 22 years ago now. It was June 10th of 1996. On June 10th of 1996, I was 32 years old. I was in federal prison. I had 7 years left to serve. And one of the cops walked in the cell house and gave me a message to call home. And I called home and learned that my father had unexpectedly passed away, 59 years old. He was very young. And I remember when my father died, the first thought that went through my head was that, my dad went to his grave with me in prison again, knowing me as a thief and a crook and a liar. At that time, I had a 3-year-old son that I had fathered out on parole. I had, abandoned him. So I kind of looked at my life. For the first time, I saw myself for what I really and truly was, which was a pathetic, self-absorbed, self-entitled loser. And I made a decision that I was going to change the course of my life. A very simple decision, which is usually what it comes down to. But I made the decision I was going to be a man that my father could have been proud of, and I was going to be the father that my son deserved. I had 7 years left to go in prison at that time, so I had nothing but time to figure it out. My master plan, this was really a genius plan on my part, right? Keep in mind, my success is not being exceptional. I'm an exceptional or an ordinary guy living an extraordinary life for sure. But I got 103 IQ, and that's documented. I've had it tested 3 times. Every time you go back to prison, they give you a series of tests, right? One of those happens to be an IQ test because they can't believe how stupid you are for coming back. And I always tested out 103, 104. That's below average. My success is focus and hard work, right? So I made the decision I was going to change the course of my life, but where do you start turning that Titanic around? 32 years old, 3-time convicted felon, 9th grade high school dropout, never had a home, as a kid I had a home, but never as an adult did I have a permanent place, just always bouncing around from this place to that place. And so my master plan was to read what really successful people do and start doing that. That was my master plan. And guess what? It worked.
It does work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the best teachers that I've ever had weren't the inventors of ideas, but they really knew how to distill these really powerful principles, first principles, and help us stay on the right path.
It's funny, when The Power of Consistency came out in 2012 or 2013, it hit number 5 on the New York Times bestsellers list and number 2 on Wall Street Journal. And through a relationship, through you, then your father, then the relationship, I met Ed Nottingham. Ed Nottingham is a PhD and a clinical psychologist, works for FedEx, and teaches mindset principles at FedEx. And he called me up and he read the book, and he said, Mr. Long, I got to tell you, this book is the simplest explanation of the neuroscience behind decision-making and success, and the principles that are the underpinnings of rational emotive behavior therapy I've ever read in my life. And I'm like, there's a name for this shit? It's all common sense, because I do break it down to its essence. If there's any talent that I have, it's taking complex discussions, complex ideas, sales, mindset, whatever, and breaking them down to their essence. And when you can focus on the essence of something and you can communicate that to people, it requires total mastery, right? As ironic as that sounds, you think the guy with the big words and the fancy degrees. To me, it's about when you can take a subject and simplify it. I have people tell me all the time in my speaking, or that read the POC, the Power of Consistency, or this book, they'll say, this is so simple, right? That's the biggest compliment anybody ever gives me. It's so simple. Because you know what? It is simple, right? People overcomplicate it for whatever reason, I don't know. But it's simple, man.
It's very true. So you, while you were in prison, then you finished your high school diploma. You did some correspondence study courses, got a degree.
Eventually got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, an MBA in management through a school in California.
So I know you read a ton of books, not just for your studies, but then you also read a lot of business books, a lot of sales books. So talk to me about that whole process.
Yeah, so the day my father died, I made this decision I was going to change the course of my life. I needed to start reading books. And so I went into this little mop closet in the cell house, and there was these cardboard boxes with books in them. The cops would come in and just throw the books in those boxes. So I walk in there and I start kind of rifling through one of those boxes, and I come across a book that's very dear to you as well, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I read that, I'm like, okay, habits of effective people. That's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Maybe there's some good information here. Maybe that's why it sold 40 million copies. I don't know. So I took it back to my cell, and I read the book, and then I reread it. And I tell people I devoured the book, and eventually it devoured me. It really became my roadmap for everything that happened after that. And I remember in the first part of that book, in the introduction, Dr. Covey's makes a statement that you have the choice to live out of your imagination rather than your past. This was really good news for me, right? Because my past was prison and poverty and drugs and violence and all this crazy stuff. And I thought at 32 years old, when I read that I thought it was too late. Like, this is what I am. I'm a convict. I'm going to walk prison yards the rest of my life. So I read that, I'm like, wait a second, living out of my imagination, maybe we should try that, because I got a pretty vivid imagination. So around that same time, I read a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, and Nietzsche said, we attract that which we fear. Job in the Bible said, that which I have feared has come upon me, right? Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl said, fear may come true. So I'm reading all this stuff about living out of my imagination, but then that fear can have a huge impact. So I started thinking about, well, what do I fear the most? And I sat down at the little metal desk in my cell, and I wrote out what I feared the most. You know what it turned out to be? Living and dying in the penitentiary, being broke, being homeless, never being a father to my son. And it occurred to me one day that all the chaos in my brain was getting out and showing up in my life. So I needed to start changing what was in here. It was my first notion of the concept that I now teach, that you got to think about what you think about before you think about it, right? I started thinking about what I was going to think about. I wrote out what a perfect life for me would look like on a sheet of paper, right? I'm an awesome father to my son. I'm wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. You know, all these amazing things. I wrote that list out. I put toothpaste in the back 4 corners, and I stuck it to the wall on my cell. And for the next 7 years, every morning when I got up and every night before I went to sleep, I would review that list. I would begin to contemplate and visualize. You know, Napoleon Hill said, imagine yourself already in possession of these things. So I would visualize having that life, being that father, being that person. 7 years later, I walked out of the penitentiary. Now, I didn't know the neuroscience behind what I was doing at the time, but I had literally changed the construction of my brain, the shape of my brain, the connections in my brain were different. I had different habitual thoughts, different habitual expectations. I walk out of the penitentiary to a homeless shelter at 40 years old. Within 5 years, I got a $20 million company. I'm writing books and traveling all over the country teaching people. So it was all about changing that thought process and stumbling in to this priceless information.
Yeah, I was listening to, I don't know if you listen to or know Jordan Peterson. He's
I'm not a fan.
Yeah,
probably should.
He's
Hope he's not watching.
He's an intellectual speaker. Anyway,
intellectual.
Yeah, he's
I don't
very
know
intellectual. So he was talking about how he likes to boil everything down to good versus evil. And what you were talking about, the thoughts that you have in your own head about it's too late. I'm 32 years old. It's too late. That's this lie that we tell ourselves. And there's lots of lies that we tell ourselves.
Absolutely.
And I think when I'm listening to you talk about that personal accountability on the way to the prison, when we were going, you were doing some speaking gig there. That really stuck with me because I think a lot of us don't even understand what it means to be personally responsible for everything that happens in our life.
Right.
And you had that pivotal moment where you know the scales came off your eyes, as you said, and now you realize it's not too late. Not only am I not a victim of some outside force, but I'm the captain of the vessel. I get to steer where I go. How do people create that for themselves?
Well, I think first is the recognition that we are responsible, right? 100% responsible. I live by a very simple acronym, CPA. I cause, permit, or allow everything in my life to happen. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes bad things don't happen to unwitting people, right? Classic example, World Trade Centers 2001. You're sitting there minding your own business, and a plane comes through your office, right? That's not your fault. You didn't cause, permit, or allow that. But in most cases in life, I find that we cause, permit, or allow whatever's going on in our world. You just said something really, really powerful. I just want to reiterate for your audience so they don't miss this line, that you can believe a lie, right? There's a wonderful book, you've probably read it, called The Four Agreements, and it's about these agreements that we make with ourselves, right? If your dad tells you you're never going to amount to nothing or anything, then you have a choice to agree with him or not. Right? Now, when you're 7 years old, you have no choice but to agree because when your dad says it's true. But when you become an adult, you can disagree with. You can say, hey, you know what? He was wrong. I saw this wonderful video. You know, Will Smith does these really cool videos on YouTube. I saw one a couple of weeks ago. He said he was talking about the difference between fault and responsibility. It may not be your fault your mom or dad was a drunk and beat you, but it's your responsibility to build a productive life. It may not be your fault that your husband dumped you or your, whatever. Things happen to people. It's not always your fault, but it's always our responsibility to fix it. When you think about in The Power of Consistency, I write about how our thoughts, right? You have a thought. It's a chemical reaction in the hypothalamus in your brain. The thought triggers the chemical that triggers the emotion. So if I have a very frightened thought, my brain starts producing adrenaline, right? Epinephrine, and I have a frightened emotion. So the emotions are always a reflection of the thought. If I walk in the room like I did this morning and saw you and I had warm and loving feelings of my old friend Dale, my brain started producing endorphins. When I felt those endorphins, I had a happy feeling like, hey, I get to see my old friend Dale. And then there was some action I took after that. And you may remember the lobby. And naturally, we open arms, we embrace, because we haven't seen each other in probably 6 months or a year, whatever it's been.
Yep.
And so the thought triggers the emotion triggers the action triggers the result. So you and I saw each other, we smile, we embrace, that's the action. What's the result? We perpetuate our relationship, right? This happens a million times a day. Our emotions and our actions are always a reflection of our thoughts, even if the thought is wrong. That's the scary part. You can believe the lie like you talked about, and it will be a lie that you believe, but the emotions will be very real. The reactions will be very real. The results can be permanent. Let me give you an example. You walk out of the theater, 11 o'clock at night, you and your spouse and your kids, you're walking across the parking lot. Guy comes running around the corner. He's got a knife in one hand. He's covered in blood. He's coming running towards you and Stephanie and the kids like he intends some harm, right? Immediately, Dale's brain says, danger, 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 protect my family. Within a nanosecond, it shoots the chemicals across your brain. The epinephrine is coursing through your veins, the adrenaline, right? You got that fight or flight emotion. Now you got to take some action, right? The guy's coming towards you. It's fight or flee. Well, you can't flee because you got little kids with you. You can't outrun them. So you got to fight, right? Fortunately for you, you're a big dude. You're 6'4", whatever, so you can handle yourself. So guy comes towards you, step in, crack him in the jaw, drop him like a sack of potatoes. What's the result? You protected your family. So far, so good. The thought triggered the chemicals, the emotion, the reaction, the result. Boom, 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 right? Everything's fine until the police get there. When the police get there and the guy regains consciousness, you find out that you misinterpreted the situation. In other words, you believed the lie because the guy was no threat to you whatsoever. The knife was fake. The blood was fake. It was all fake. It was a teenage kid running across the parking lot to meet some friends for a Halloween party. You assaulted a perfectly innocent teenager. Now, the thought turned out to be wrong, but how real were the emotions you felt? How real were the actions you took? How real is his broken jaw? You see, this is what happens in life. We can believe a lie, like we're no good, we're not worthy, I can't do this, I can't do that, whatever the lie is. And the emotions that come from that lie are 100% real. The actions we take as a result of that emotion are 100% real. And the life we build, for better or for worse, is 100% real. So when you say that you can believe a lie, I want your audience to get that. Because it's not just that you believe the lie, you end up creating the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's why our mother always said, be careful what we
wish for.
Yeah, this is common sense stuff. That's why you don't need a PhD, right? You don't need to be a clinical psychologist to get this stuff.
I should have listened to my mom, you're saying. Yeah.
We all should have.
So you're saying our actions and our results line up with our thoughts. Our emotions and our actions and our results line up with whatever we allow our thoughts to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, if you think about it, right, the thoughts and emotions are invisible. The actions and results are very visible. You got to fix the invisible permanently before you can permanently fix the visible. We humans try to do it backwards. We try to start with the result and go backwards, right? Einstein said you cannot change the result of anything at the same level of thinking that created that result, right? Well, let's look at why. if I want a new result, let's say I want a new sales result in my business, right? We're going to start prospecting more. We're going to start getting more signings. We're going to start selling more real estate. So we got to change our result, right? So what do we got to do? If we're going to change the result, we got to change our actions. What are we going to do? We're going to get better at closing. We're going to prospect 10 times a day. We're going to do that stuff. And then we stop. And now we're trying to pull new results and new actions out of old thoughts and emotions about prospecting and sales. And next thing you know, we end up going right back to where we were, right? If you want temporary change, focus on your actions. If you want permanent change, you got to focus on the thoughts, because the invisible thoughts are fueling everything. That's the key to this thing.
So what are the thoughts then that you've seen a ton of salespeople, most salespeople fall into, that are just incorrect thoughts? They're the lies that we allow to creep in that ruin our sales career day at a time, month at a time.
Right. Yeah, it happens very, very subtly, right? It doesn't happen it's like, why do people smoke? Well, people smoke cigarettes because it won't kill you today, right?
Yeah.
But imagine it's December 31st and you just ran your last showing of the year. You come back to your office, there's $100,000 on your desk, and that represents all the extra hard work you had that year. And let's say one of your customers or somebody came up and said, hey, can I have that $100,000? You wouldn't give it away, right?
Right.
Funny thing is, if you take that $100,000 and you break it down to what you got to do to make an extra $400 a day, because extra $400 a day, $2,000 a week, $100,000 a week, that extra $400 a day, those activities that we got to do, sometimes we make the exact opposite decision. We give that $400 away, right? We give it away in calls we never make, orders we never ask for, opportunities we never go after, right? We give our money away $400 at a time. So let's get back to your question, which was the thought. What are the thoughts that can be really undermining? One of the things that I do with audiences is I will do a little game of word association. We'll do it right now. And we've got some guys here in the studio. We've got you, so I've got 3 here live, and we've got some people watching. I'm going to give you a word, and when I give you that word, what I want you to do, and you guys here, to give me the first word that comes to your mind, right? You don't say it out loud. Just think of that. Don't think about what you're supposed to think, right? First word that comes to mind. Ready? Okay. This is for you guys out there too. Ready? The word is salesman. Salesman. What's the first word that comes to your mind? Don't lie.
Sleazy.
Sleazy.
Yeah, I didn't have an exact word, but it's
along that vibe.
Dishonest.
Dishonest. Okay. Sleazy, dishonest. Right? Now, imagine I'm in sales, and I want to get really good at sales, but fundamentally in my box, which is the metaphor I use for the brain, I believe that sales is sleazy, high pressure, scummy, whatever it is. What's the likelihood I'm ever going to get really good at sales?
You're not.
So we have to examine what's in the box about sales. What's in the box about money? Money's another big thing that goes hand in hand with sales, right? Listen, most of what we know about money in this country came from the Great Depression, because everybody is 1 or 2 generations removed from the Great Depression.
That's right.
What did we learn about money in the Great Depression, right? Only there was a handful of people that had it. And we had a name for them in this country. You remember what the name, like in the early 1900s, Carnegie, Rockefeller, there was a name we had for those people. It was part of the American culture.
They were exploiters. I don't remember.
Exploiters, robber barons.
Robber barons.
There's books written about the robber barons.
Yeah.
This is the culture. What does that say? That the wealthy people got wealthy by robbing others. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, rich people are crooks. My dad really believed that. I believe that. Where do you think my dad learned that? From his father, who lived through the Great Depression, right? So I grew up. I started stealing money to make money, but hey, rich people are crooks, right? It became a very destructive, self-fulfilling prophecy. So what do we think about money? Do we believe money doesn't grow on trees? We can't afford that. My dad used to always say, who do you think we are, the Rockefellers? Well, who the hell are the Rockefellers, right? One of the robber barons, right? According to some people. My point is these basic, very subtle perceptions about money and about sales, about profitability, can undermine our success. And we think, well, no, I want to be profitable. I want to make money. I want to be great at sales. Well, really? You want to be great at sales, but the first thing that came to your mind was sleazy. And by the way, you are great at sales. So my point is you have to be aware of these limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, let me give you one story. It really illustrates the problem. I'm doing a seminar for business owners a couple of years ago. And I'm having lunch with this couple. They were in their mid-30s. They own their own business, but they were not successful. They couldn't rub 2 nickels together, right? They were struggling. They'd been in business 10 years. Couldn't make any money. Struggle. Cash flow problems. And we're having lunch. And at one point, the wife says, she goes, my dad was like your dad. He hated rich people, right? He didn't want me hanging out with the rich kids. He didn't want the rich kids over at our house. He hated rich kids. So she started talking about her dad and how he passed away and how she missed him. And then she tells me, she goes, not only did my dad hate the rich people, he admired people who struggled financially. He would say, honey, the struggle is real. Admire the struggle, right? So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about all this stuff going in her box, right? Well, that afternoon we're back in session. And the assignment for the group was they had to distill their financial goals for their business down to one sentence. So she and her husband worked on it for a while. And I came around to their table and I asked them what their goal was. And she said, our goal, distilled down to one sentence, is that we're going to retire at 50 years old. I said, I like that. It's very succinct. It's very measurable. It's very clear, very focused, very specific. And I said, so you're going to retire at 50? She goes, yep, we're going to retire at 50. I said, let me ask you a question. If you retire at 50 and you live to be 90, that means you got to live 40 years with no new income. She said, yeah, that's what retirement is, right? I said, yeah, but if you're going to live 40 years with no new income, what do you have to literally be financially to do that? And she looks at me and she says, smart. I said, no, I know a lot of dumbasses that are wealthy. She says, you got to be lucky. I said, well, your luck doesn't hurt, but you have to be lucky. What do you have to be, literally? She said, you got to be rich. I said, yeah, you got to be rich to retire at 50. And she gets a smile on her face, ear to ear. She turns to her husband. She says, honey, we're going to be rich, right? She looks at me up on a platform. We're going to be rich. It sounded so good. She loved the way it sounded. And then I had to give her a little dose of reality. I said, so now you want to become the thing that your father hated the most? A rich person? I thought you told me you wanted to make your father proud. What would make her father proud?
She struggled.
You see? So you can have this inner conflict in here. And out here in real life, she's trying to build a business. She was very smart, hardworking. Her husband was too. They're willing to do the work. But fundamentally in the box, this very destructive lie that was in there was holding her back. It's a huge obstacle. We have to analyze. This is why I say you got to think about what you think about.
Yeah.
Don't just get up all day, start thinking. Stop and think about what you're going to think about before you think about it. That's what the prosperity plan and quiet time ritual is all about in the power of consistency. So when you say that people can believe a lie, not only can we believe a lie, we can bring that lie to life.
Yeah, we manifest it.
Totally. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So we've got these little worms inside our brains that are just festering around in there. We don't even know that we have them sometimes, maybe.
Right.
We haven't thought about the fact that we might have this lie that I remember, I was going through this exercise with you years ago, and I remember my dad used to thump me on the head and say, things break. Because I was the middle child. I broke my brother's, toys. He's a big helicopter. He'd thump me on the head and say, things break. And then that night at dinner, I'm pouring the milk, and I pour it too fast. It spills all over the place. And then my dad started calling me the heedless breaker. That was his nickname for me. And so it's just this little innocent thing. My dad's frustrated. He calls me the heedless breaker. This was probably maybe a 2-week period where he called me the heedless breaker. But it stuck around in my brain. And then as an adult, I realized I'm still walking around being a little careless. I'm being clumsy. I'm just breaking things and knocking things over. And I realized going through this exercise about thinking about what's in my box, I've got this label that my dad put on me when I was a little kid. I'm the heedless breaker, and I was just allowing that to kind of float around in there.
Right.
And then I say to myself, wait, I'm not a heedless breaker. I'm a careful person. And guess what? Overnight, I'm not clumsy anymore.
Right.
Because I decided to change the label that my dad had inadvertently, permanently put in my brain.
You decided to break the agreement.
Right.
For years, you agreed with your father, subconsciously.
True.
Very subtly. But one day when you made the connection, you said, hey, I'm breaking this agreement, Dad. I love you, but I'm breaking the agreement.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Right. And my dad's a good dad. But
Yeah.
just these little things that innocently, they get in there somehow, and then we let them float around. So
Well, let me give you another, because they get in there innocently. People don't mean to do it. Your dad was playing around
Right.
with you. He's kidding around with you, right? I was doing high school graduation at commencement a couple of years ago in Sacramento. Large school, 400 or 500 kids graduating. And I'm talking about what lies are you believing, that you better check those lies before you go out in the real world, right? Just like you were talking about with, the heathen breaker, right?
Yep.
The heathen breaker. So I got kids coming up to me at the end, and they're telling me what lie they're trying to break. And this little girl comes up to me. She looked like she was in 8th grade, but she was a high school senior. She comes up to me, and she looks at me, and she says, my daddy told me I was too black to go to college. And when she said that, my heart just like somebody kicked me in the solar plexus. I couldn't believe. And my first reaction is, where's your dad? Let's go talk to your dad right now, because I will straighten his ass out, right? course, I couldn't do that. Her dad wasn't even there, but we talked for a while, and she understood it was a lie and it was wrong. But for a couple of weeks, it bothered me. Why would a man tell this beautiful child something that could be so potentially destructive? And then, Dale, one day it hit me. I don't know for sure, but this is what hit me, and this is how I, resolved it in my brain. I got to thinking, when that young man, her father, when he was a young man, he was coming up, do you think that he might have experienced in the 60s and some 70s some racial bias and prejudice? Yeah, of course he did. And when he did that, what did it do? It crushed his spirit, just like it would for any of us that had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then one day he grows up. He's 20, 25, 30 years old. He's got this beautiful baby girl. What's the last thing in the world he wants to have happen to her? He doesn't want to have her spirit crushed. So he begins to diminish her expectations out of love and protection. You're too black to go to college, baby. Right? In a misguided attempt to protect her, he put this stuff in her head. So when you say your dad was just kidding around, of course he was. People don't do it out of anger. They don't do it out of trying to hurt us. In many cases, they do it because they think they're protecting us. So we got to ask ourselves, what do we really think about sales? What do we really think about holding firm on 6% commissions? Right? What do we really believe on discounting our services? I write about specifically about real estate in this book, about how getting listings and how people always want a discount, right? It's commissions in this state, right? I write a lot about the conversations that we need to have before commissions ever come up, to hold people accountable and to demonstrate to them that there's a lot more to selling real estate than a cheap commission, right? So we got to make sure that we have the right thoughts, and we got to make sure we got to check our prospects' thoughts too, right? Because they can have limiting beliefs.
That's true.
Right? Nobody pays 6%. Well, that's a limiting belief. Bitch, if I'm selling your house, you're paying 6%, right?
So
you can edit that out, I guess. You edit that out? Beep it or something?
So we've been talking a lot about these thoughts, and we've been talking about them from the perspective of other people putting them in our heads. But you talk a lot about the thoughts that we put in our own heads as well, especially when it comes to sales, the economy, all that. All people want is a lower commission. That's all that the homeowner wants. So tell us a little bit about how you go about examining those things. And I know you do this in your book and in your trainings on your website.
Right.
But talk to us a little bit about what's the process we need to go through to check on that stuff for ourselves.
Yeah. Before I do that, I want to remind people, I'm just checking the number here. Text the word for sale, the numeral four, the number for sale, to 96,000.
Okay.
And all you have to do is agree. I want to do a free demo to an online training program. We'll send you a free copy of this book or the other one. If you prefer Power of Consistency, we'll send you that one as well. So text the word for sale, again, the numeral for sale,
No
sale,
space.
one word, no space, one word, number for sale, to 96,000. And we'll get you a copy of either of these books. Okay. Now, getting back to your question. When we buy into the lie, even if we're buying into someone else's lie. We've been talking about buying into our own lies, right?
Right.
Well, we can buy in to other people's lies too. So when I'm listing a home, for example, a lot of times people have the belief that a 6% commission is outdated, right? Because you got the discount, the do-it-yourselves, and all that kind of stuff. And so the belief is nobody pays 6%. That's a lie. That's a limiting belief. Now, we can choose to buy into that or not. We can choose to buy into the lie that a 6% commission is no longer possible, or maybe at least not possible all the time.
Or not modern or whatever.
Right. Here's the thing. So the key to this process, consistency selling, it's based on a basic premise that public declarations dictate future actions, right? A lot of work by Robert Cialdini, Arizona State, that basically if we get people to make a statement, they become more likely to take actions consistent with that statement, because we want our actions and our words to be in alignment, right? Public declarations dictate future actions. Very famous study done by Robert Cialdini. In Arizona, this company went out and they would send out canvassers in the neighborhoods to knock on doors and raise money for childhood disabilities research. Over time, they found out about 18% of people would actually make a contribution. They wanted to increase that rate. Cialdini comes up with the idea. They set up a room of telemarketers, and they would call into the neighborhood before the canvassers went in. Now, the telemarketers would not ask for any money. They would simply take a survey. But one of the survey questions was, do you believe it's important to support childhood disabilities research? Well, if someone calls your house and says that, what are you going to say? Of course it's important. Right, yes.
Yeah.
The next week, they would send the canvassers. What they found is that the rate of contribution doubled to 36% in those neighborhoods. Why? Because people subconsciously knew they made a public declaration that it was important, and they felt an obligation to take actions consistent with that.
Wow.
I remember when I first read about this research, it was in 2004, and it was in Cialdini had written an article in American Scientific Mind. And I read this. There were so many studies along those same lines. And I started realizing the implications on sales. If I could get my prospect to admit price, commission wasn't the most important thing, then they would be more likely to act in a manner consistent with that in many cases, not 100% of the cases, right? So I started thinking, so let's use a real estate example. I'm going to try to list your home, right? We're having coffee, and I say, so Dale, I appreciate you having coffee with me, and I'm pretty excited for you and Stephanie. You guys are going to sell your house and buy this big new mansion and all that, and I really want the privilege of selling your home for you. Now, Dale, I know that one of the things that you're going to be considering in selling your home is how much does it cost to sell it, right? Because whatever that number is, it comes off of the equity you have in your home, the money you're going to walk away from. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people are looking at discount options and this type of thing. And is the commission rate that you pay, I mean, that's probably going to be part of the decision making?
Yep. Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah, no, I understand the same way. What I'd like to do is to share an article with you, Dale, from the American Real Estate Association, and they list 10 things to consider when choosing a realtor. They go through here, marketing budget, experience in the neighborhood, 4 or 5 other things. And look here at number 5. 5 is the commission. Now, I don't know about you. When I read that, the commission was only the 5th most important consideration, I was a little surprised. But let me ask this, Dale. I mean, now that you think about it, would you agree or disagree with the American Real Estate Association that there are some factors that are as important, perhaps even more important, than a cheap commission?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You have to. You just read it, right?
Yep.
Now we're going to fast forward to the end, right? I just set that anchor, and I got you to make that public declaration by using third-party validation. By the way, I forget which article it was, but I researched it's in this book, right?
Great.
There's tons of articles. All you got to do is go online right now to Google and type in things to consider when hiring a real estate agent, and you'll get 1 million articles, and all of them will cite other factors more important than the commission, right?
Sure.
Right? The marketing expertise, that type of thing, right? So I set that anchor with you, what I call a consistency anchor. Now we're going to fast forward to the end, and I'm going to ask you for the listing, okay? Well, Dale, I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I hope you can see that my firm, we could just move heaven and earth to get this house sold for you at the price that you're looking for, and we really like to have that opportunity. So here's the thing, Dale. I realize there's 150 different real estate agents here in town, but if you let me handle the listing on this home, a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, everything's going to happen just the way I've told you that it would today. Our marketing expertise, our knowledge of the neighborhood, all those different things, the database of buyers that we already have, we're going to bring our full, weight behind all that to help you sell your home. The second thing I promise you is this: if there's anything that you're unhappy with during that process, we're going to move heaven and earth, Dale, to make it perfect for you and Stephanie. Now, the only question I have for you is very simple. Will you trust me with your listing? Now, I want you to tell me that my commission's too high.
I talked to somebody last week that they were willing to do it for a 4% commission.
Yeah.
And, Stephanie and I, we really like you, Wally. We want to list it with you. Is there anything you can do on that commission? Bring it down to 4?
Well, let me ask you this, Dale, because that's a really interesting question. Earlier, we were looking at that article from American Real Estate Association, and you had mentioned that you agreed that there were a variety of factors that were more important than just the cheap commission. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's changed at all in our time together?
No, I don't think so.
Well, great. With your permission, what do you say we start the paperwork? So all I did there is I held you accountable back to the statement that you had made a half an hour earlier. And when I made that statement, you might have even felt it here just in the role play. It's called cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. The anxiety that we feel as human beings when your actions are inconsistent with what you said. Because an hour ago you said price wasn't the most important. Now you're telling me you want a cheap commission. Those are not consistent thoughts, right?
Right.
So my job is simply to remind you of what you said earlier and allow you to feel that dissonance, that anxiety, that nervousness, right? And when you're done telling me whatever you're going to tell me, because it really doesn't matter what you say to me at that point, because I know I've made my point, when your mouth stops moving, I'm just going to say, I get it. But with your permission, what do you say we start the paperwork? And what happens in that moment is that the anxiety you're feeling, I'm like throwing you a life preserver, right? Because how do you start feeling better? How do you get back to resonance? You say yes to me, right? And you grab that life raft, right? And so it's about using basic psychology. It's about learning this process, right? And leveraging basic psychology and basic sales to get the things you want. Listen, consumers are more sophisticated than ever. They got access to billions of gigabytes of information thanks to the internet, right? There's a real estate agent on every corner, right? What do people think they do when they think they're going to make easy money? I'm going to real estate. Really? You think it's that easy? But you got all these people competing. What happens when you got too many people competing? Commissions start going down. Listen, if we walk into a listing opportunity and we allow people to walk away from that meeting still believing that a low commission is the most important thing, whose responsibility is that, Dale?
Yeah, it's
That's my responsibility. That's what a professional does, right? A professional salesperson changes people's minds. Yes, they may walk into the meeting with me thinking 4%, but if I let them walk out, here's another thing. This consistency can work against you as well. Suppose mom and pop homeowner that are fixing to sell it, they're having a conversation just before they come meet with me. And they're having a conversation about the commission. What are they saying to each other?
Oh, yeah.
We're paying 4%. We're just paying 4%. Well, my Aunt Sally...
Let me handle it. I'll make sure that lower the commission on this one.
Right. So public declarations dictate future actions. Suppose that's the last conversation they have about the sales commission. What decision are they going to make at the end now? They're going to make a decision consistent with what they told each other. So if I don't broach the subject of commission, right, which is what a lot of people do, they just don't want to bring it up. They hope mysteriously, miraculously, there's a tooth fairy, right? There really is a Santa Claus. No one's going to bitch about my commissions, right? That's foolhardy. We have to know they're having those conversations because they're so sophisticated. They have access to so much information. We know they're having a conversation about a 4% commission. My job as a professional is to change their minds. That's what a professional does. So you got to be, listen, this book is dedicated to salespeople, right? The men and women in the sales industry, real estate in particular, and insurance is where I do a lot of my work, right? You eat what you kill.
Yeah.
There's no free lunch. There's no guaranteed salary when you're a real estate agent.
Nope.
Man, you don't shoot it, you don't eat it. Come on, man.
Well, hey, Wally, what was I professionally, what was my title when I started working for you? You remember?
I think it was VP of sales and then CEO or president. I forget.
Internet marketing. It was internet marketing director.
Yeah. That was the wrong title.
It was.
I should have had you VP of sales. No,
do you know what? Do you know why I changed my title?
Why?
Everything you taught me about sales.
Well, you're very good at it.
You changed my mind about the whole sales profession.
Yeah, we're not a bunch
because
of
I always knew I was good at sales.
I got more work to do because you still think sleazy when I say salespeople. I want you to start thinking problem solver.
I was just making it easy for you.
Hero of the world. Okay.
I was making it ewe for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love sales, and the reason why I love sales is because of the time I worked with you and how you're able to, we were working with a lot of HVAC contractors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning contractors.
Oh my God.
These guys are like mechanics, and you turn them into full-blown sales professionals.
Yeah.
Guys that took pride in pressing their shirts and walking in with good presentation materials and walking away with the order.
Right.
It's a really inspiring message that you can change your mindset, you can tweak a few things in your sales process, and you can be really proud of the work that you're doing, and
Absolutely.
you can earn a lot more money.
Listen, in sales, you get compensated based on the number of problems you solve for people. It's not about high pressure. It's about high service. It's about problem solving. If you solve complex problems for people, and as real estate agents, we do, right? Because you're solving one of the most important issues. Where am I going to live? What schools are my kids going to? What's my quality of life going to be like based on this neighborhood and this home? Those are pretty important questions in life. You're solving very important problems for people. The more of those problems you solve, in other words, the more you sell, the more money you make.
Right.
You're not getting paid so much to sell real estate. You're getting paid to solve problems for people. I have a whole other section in this book dedicated to finding the emotional triggers that are fueling the purchasing decision, right? You can make a living solving problems for people. You can make a fortune finding out the emotions driving the problems. Because when you start solving emotional problems for people, that's when you make the big money. That's why I get compensated what I do, because I solve hardcore emotional problems for business owners and CEOs and sales executives, right? If I can come in and drive sales, that's a big problem. And there's a lot of emotion behind not solving that problem. Let me give you an example. So let's say, for example, safety is an issue for you and your family. Maybe you're moving out of a bad neighborhood into a better neighborhood. And I'm the agent, and I say, so Dale, what's driving this move across town? And tell me.
Well, yeah, so we moved in this neighborhood. It seemed like a really nice street, but the next street over, there's an apartment complex. We heard gunshots. The police are there all the time. We just worry. During the day, it feels safe, but at night, when I go to sleep, I never know what's going to show up on the doorstep.
Wow. I can't even imagine. I mean, as a father myself, how did that feel as a dad to hear those gunshots?
Yeah, it definitely gives me a lot of anxiety, I feel like I need to keep my family safe, and it doesn't feel safe.
So you just told me two very emotive terms, feel safe and anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I got something to sell to, right? Now I got you by the tail. I got you right where I want you now, Dale.
Yeah.
Because now I'm not just solving a house problem at the end. So Dale, I'm going to recommend you guys go ahead and put an offer on this home, because it seems to me it's perfect for everything that you've wanted. Most importantly, it's in a really safe neighborhood. Here's the thing I can promise you, Dale. If you go ahead and put an offer on this property and we can consummate this deal, you're never going to have to feel anxiety and feel for the safety of your kids again. Will you trust me with this recommendation? See, I'm selling that anxiety and that fear to protect your family as a father, as a man, as a provider and protector. I'm not selling you a piece of real estate.
Yeah.
I'm selling you a safety for your children. So in the sales process, in addition to the dealing with the commission stuff, you have to do what I call an investigation. The investigation is to get beneath the need, beneath the want, and find out the emotion driving the purchasing decision. Because when I find out the emotion, it's very easy to do too, because people speak in emotive terms. I feel angry, sad, frustrated, anxiety, you said, anxious, right? Those are emotive terms. When I come back and offer you the solution, I have to tie it back to the emotive terms. If you trust me with this recommendation and put this offer in, Dale, what's going to happen is you're never going to feel that anxiety about your children's safety again. Will you trust me with this? Come on, man.
Of course.
We got to think. We can't just go into business and think I'm going to build a real estate empire based on luck and happenstance. Based on hopefully I'm going to find 1,000 people this year, 100 people this year who won't bitch about my commission. They're all going to bitch about your commission. Your job is to change 100 people's minds about your commission. That's what I'm talking about.
So you've got a 3-part process that you teach, and it's get the mind right. Why don't you say it?
Get the mind right, get the sales right, get the consistency right. In a lot of training organizations, they talk about the sales process. As a real estate agent, how am I going to get new listings? How am I going to sell property, et cetera? That's really important, right? But the sales process is one part of a 3-part puzzle. You got to have one bookend, which is the prosperity mindset, which is the mindset to thrive and prosper in the face of any challenges. And on the other bookend, you have to have consistency. You got to be thinking the right thing and doing the right things on an ongoing, consistent basis. The way I teach that, I do it in live situations, but we also have an online training program. It's online courses for the prosperity mindsets based on my book, The Power of Consistency. Then we have the consistency selling program, which is this. And then there's a series of modules that customize it for the real estate industry, right? We do real estate, insurance, and automotive, kind of those 3 verticals. But in that course, I teach you the consistency selling model, but then I take it a step further and give the specific examples that are relevant for that. But here's the best part. So we got the mindset, right? There's a 2.5, 3-hour program on the prosperity mindset, about a 3-hour sales training program, another hour or so on customizing for real estate, for getting listings and closing business. But then the third component is the consistency. And so we do a weekly television show, kind of like you do here. It's called Weldon Long Live. And every week you get to log on. I'm going to do some training. I'm going to do some motivation. And I'm going to answer some questions. So you call in live and say, hey, I was trying to list this property, and the prospect said their brother-in-law was an agent. What should I have said, right? I'll work with you and help you solve those problems, right? Because this whole process, the consistency, is not just doing it one time. We got to do it on and on and on again. And so we get the mind right with the prosperity mindset training. We get the sales right with the consistency selling model. And then we do the weekly coaching, the Weldon Long Live, to keep you going. Every week, I want to be in your office. I want to talk to your agents. I want to keep them motivated. I want to keep them focused. Whenever they have a down week, I want to put a boot in their ass. They say I'm 1 part hug and 1 part thug, right? Sometimes people just need a hug, right? Sometimes you got to thug them up a little bit, get them, over that complaining and stuff. And again, I want to remind your viewers, text the word For sale, the number 4. I don't know why we did it that way. It could not be more complicated. But for sale, the number 4, SALE, all one word, to $96,000. And all we're asking your folks to do is to agree to spend 30 minutes with me. And I'll do it personally for your group. For this group, I will.
Awesome.
So I'll do it personally. I'll walk them through the platform, show them how we can, super affordable. We're talking a couple of bucks a day. It's ridiculously affordable. So we take them through the program, how we get them in our programs. They'll get both of these books. Hell, I'll throw in a copy of The Upside of Fear, too, which was a pretty good book in its own right.
It's a really good book.
That was my first book, right? Writer's Digest, Best Book of the Year, New York Book Festival, Best Autobiography of the Year. So when you get signed up, we'll send you all 3 books. I've got a 100-page workbook that goes with this one and a 100-page workbook that goes with The Power of Consistency. So we encourage people to go through the online training, right? Then go through the book with the workbook and do all the exercises, and then start joining me every week on Weldon Long Live. I guarantee you, give me a month, give me 60 days, and I'll rock your world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So check out weldonlong.com.
Oh, yeah.
Text for sale to 96000. The number 4, 96000.
Yeah.
And look them up on Facebook. Look up Weldon Long on Facebook for
see all my pretty coats. I didn't wear one today, but I love my pretty coats. Man, it's really good to see you, Dale.
It was really good to see you,
guys are really doing
too.
Great here, too, man. I'm very excited for you.
We're working our hardest.
You're 1 in a million, my friend.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, I want to just say this as we close. When I think of my formative years, I only have to go back a few years because you changed my life too. I didn't really have a definite purpose in my career until I met you, and you changed the whole trajectory of my career. You gave me a lot more focus. You reinvigorated my excitement about sales, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you did for me.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure, man.
Thanks, Wally.
Amen.